Hello, friends. I'm here, and we're going to do a little show and tell here today. But before I tell you what we're going to do, I need to thank you guys for giving us a thumbs up and subscribing, because that really helps us out a lot. Okay? So our show and tell item today is Orthon. Now, I've been reporting on this subject for a while, but there's still many people who have not heard of Orthon. So we're going to bring a classic case of Orthonism back for review. There's a few things that are really good about this story. No. 1. Orthon man from Venus. Orthon was entirely human and had long blonde hair, which reportedly allowed him to attend some functions dressed as a woman. I think he was about 5'8". He had a much livelier personality than all those blonde Pleiadians who are so never crack a smile. Howard Menger, From Outer Space to You. The book was originally printed in 1959 and contains photos of Adamski-type bell-shaped ships and some buildings on the moon. A photo of atmospheric clouds on the moon is from an interesting view. Perhaps some of you astronomer types could match it, crater-wise, to one from NASA. This book gives information on diet and soil that today would be recognized as correct. Howard had a typical boyhood contactee experience when he was 10 years old in 1932. Hiking in the woods, he met a girl sitting on a rock by a brook who he had a long conversation with. Other contacts includes a long-haired blonde man who he met in the military and refused to talk to since men didn't wear long hair in those days. Later, he helped arriving space people get clothes and bus fare. Howard eventually married a lady who was connected with his destiny. They are together today and are a lively, happy couple who look like they are in their 40s when they are now mid-70s. They have an updated version of the book for sale that includes the last 30-some years. So here we have a person who came from another planet, right? And he lived among us, and he taught us a lot of things. This person was very helpful. He gave us a lot of information. And if you go read the book, you will find out that he told us many things that later were proven to be true, right? But what is interesting about this, and this is the second thing that's really good about this story, is that he also brought forward some things that were obviously false. For example, he said that there were cities on the moon, and it turns out there aren't any cities on the moon, and he showed us pictures of these cities on the moon. And so the fact of the matter is, even though some of the things he said were true and some of them were not true, the fact of the matter is he had enough truthful information to where it made the untrue stuff seem believable. So, it's a package deal, right? Now, the third thing that's really good about this story is the fact of the matter is there are lots of people who know about this story. Okay? I mean, literally, hundreds of thousands of people have read this book, and yet most people don't know about it. You know, there's a few people who remember it, and they'll call in from time to time and say, "Yeah, I remember that book. I read that book when I was younger, and it really affected me. I still have the book somewhere, you know." And yet, if you go to a bookstore and you ask someone or a library, they won't know anything about this book. So this is something that is very well known within the community of people who study UFOs and extraterrestrials and things like that, but it's totally unknown to the general public. The fourth thing that's really good about this story is the fact of the matter is, it demonstrates something that I like to call beginner's mind. So basically what happened was, in the early 50s, George Adamski comes along and he's having flying saucer experiences. And he meets these nice people from another planet, and they're teaching him all sorts of stuff. And then we get into the 60s, and we start hearing about other people from other planets, right? We start hearing about this guy, Ashtar. And then we hear about, this lady, Laura Lee, and then we hear about Ram Ba, who is the teacher of Jesus. And Jesus himself was an E.T. And then, of course, we get to the Pleiadians. Now, if you meet a Pleiadian, you'll notice that they have Nordic-looking features, right? They have these sandy-colored eyes and the sandy hair, and they're always blonde, and they're very tall, and they're very fair-skinned. And of course, they're vegetarians, and they don't eat anything. Yeah, they're super spiritual. Now, with the Pleiadians, we get this whole idea of auras and chakras, and the fact of the matter is, they have no emotions. They are highly intellectual, and they're logical, and, they're cold, and they're not warm and fuzzy at all. And they're super advanced technologically. And, they're beyond religion. They're beyond all this other stuff. They're just all about science and logic and mathematics. And so that becomes the paradigm after Howard Menger wrote his book in 1959. Then we don't hear about anyone who resembles Orthon again until the late 70s. And that's when we start getting Billie Eilish, and then we start getting Eva Marcus and Alex Collier. All of a sudden, we have all these new contactees coming forward, and they're all telling us about how, hey, we got to evolve. We got to evolve to the next level and become like the Pleiadians. We got to learn how to love each other. We got to learn how to sit around in circles and sing Kumbaya, and, we got to learn how to share our feelings, and we got to be more emotional. Now, when Howard Menger wrote his book in 1959, he was talking about a completely different set of ideas, okay? He wasn't talking about chakras and auras and, vegetarianism. He was talking about how we can understand that this planet was intelligently designed. He was saying that there are intelligent civilizations all throughout the universe. He was talking about the fact of the matter is, we are immortal and we are eternal, and our bodies are like these temporary cars that we drive. And when we're done driving them, we turn them in and get a new one. And that's all part of the process. He was talking about the fact of the matter is, we are creators. We can create our own reality. He was talking about the law of attraction. He was talking about all of these different things that later became popular with the New Age movement. But he introduced them in the late 50s and early 60s. And so, of course, when George Adamski was telling us about these wonderful, beautiful, loving, caring people from Venus, they were much more in line with the paradigm of the time. But what happened when Howard Menger started writing his stories about his friend from Venus, Orthon, was that he was actually introducing a new paradigm. So you had the old paradigm of the time, which was this George Adamski paradigm, which was very similar to what Howard Menger had written. And then all of a sudden you have this new paradigm popping up out of nowhere, and it was so different from everything else. It really stood out. It was very vivid. It was very clear. And it introduced concepts that were outside of the box. And as a result of that, it had an enormous influence on the UFO community. And what's funny is, it's still an influence today, even though we've heard about Orthon maybe a dozen times or so over the last 50 years. Still, the concept of Orthonism lives on. And we still have people contacting Orthon. And we still have people who are asking for Orthon. And what happens is, every time we have one of these waves of, Orthonism happening where people are talking about Orthon a lot, you get this rush of, oh my gosh, we've got to evolve. And then when that wears off, then everyone goes back to normal and Orthon goes away again. And then all of a sudden, 6 months or a year later, Orthon pops up again. And we have another round of Orthonism. Now, why does this happen? Why does Orthon come into fashion every once in a while and then go out of fashion? Well, I think it has to do with the fact of the matter is, we are ready to accept certain information at certain times. And when Howard Menger first came out with his story back in the late 50s and early 60s, we weren't quite ready for it. I think it was too far out there for us. I think we weren't ready to accept it, but we've gradually become more ready to accept it. And so now, maybe 50 years later, now we're ready to accept it. So Orthon comes back in style. And the reason that Orthon comes back in style is because we are ready to accept certain information at certain times. We are like sponges, and we absorb what we're ready to absorb. And so right now, we're ready to absorb Orthon. And I think it's very interesting that Orthon is still in style today. And I think it's very interesting that we're still influenced by Orthon today. I think he's a very fascinating person, and I think he has a lot to teach us. Hey, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and give us a thumbs up.